are hydroponics' greatest competitors? And how does this haters to lovers story get so hot? Wait, sorry, wrong topic? Today we are going to be going over the top 3 greatest competitors in hydroponic history. And yes, the chronological history of hydroponic will be coming soon, just be patient, I swear it's coming. Alright, part 1. Part 1 is focusing on Hexxis, which, during the golden age of hydroponic, which took place between 2020 and 2022, owned by a strange individual named Jordan. Hexxis, to its credit, was fairly similar to the old school hydroponic, or what you'd now see in the Xylem, classic safe zone, non-drop armor, but what really made it stand out was its emphasis on crafting and resource collection. This gave the server a surprisingly solid endgame, and arguably better than Hydra's at the time. Jordan even made his own modded content for his server, which definitely saved him a lot of money and would help him with his other pursuits, which we'll get to in a moment. Hexxis was the only other semi-RP server that came out close to the height Hydro reached during the era. But despite their strengths, Hydro still beat them in player count for the most part during this period, though they would still beat us in other aspects. Where they really beat us, though, was in their ability to squeeze every last dollar from their player base. And I really do mean squeeze, like, to a certain point that it really became an issue. Hexxis eventually developed a reputation for scummy monetization practices, at least going off of what I've heard and, well, future events. Stuff they may have played a part in what came next. You see, Jordan had a bit of a reputation for being money hungry, which, hey, I can't judge too harshly, maybe I might be one, and, server owners, we all have our vices, so, no shame there. But eventually Hexxis was taken down for a certain period of time by breaking monetization rules. Not great, I will tell you that much. But they're back up now. Apparently they're relaunching, or already relaunched. Oh yeah, and there's also the point when Hydro and Hexxis merged for a little while. I'll be honest, that only really ever happened because, benefited Hydro, and I was a fiend back then, as you might say. But yeah, don't ask, total clusterfuck. Was clearly done out of self-interest, and surprisingly didn't last long. Or, I guess, not surprisingly. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic. Now, the next server is Xylem. Now, Xylem is obviously probably the weakest competitor we ever had. Not to say that they weren't strong, like, as a server itself, but to say that, well, there wasn't really much competition going on. More like they were there, and we were dying over there. So, this mainly took up the period where Hydro relaunched this year. And if you guys don't already know, Hydro didn't do too well, like many other legacy servers. Xylem effectively controlled the semi-RP category during this period. Dropping player numbers and consolidation of the player base made it extremely difficult for legacy servers like Hydroponic and the next competitor on this list to gain traction and re-establish themselves when relaunching. Now, Xylem itself is a server that reflects the old school meta, most commonly seen during the golden age of Hydroponic, non-drop armors, safe zones, and fast, easy PvP that made the server accessible and enjoyable for players of all different skill levels, which basically made it a lot easier for them to gain a much higher player base and much more easily consolidate the semi-RP player base. Xylem also made a fair bit of money, with estimates and insider information putting their earnings around $2,000 a month on average. That's over $1,000 more than Hydroponic's average. That said, I'm more than confident Hydroponic, or really any other server, could have matched that if we had 60 plus players, online nearly all day, like Xylem currently has. In fact, there was actually a time we hit that level of activity, and yes, we pulled over $2,000 that month, though obviously there's going to be outlier months. Xylem's high revenue came from a strategy focused on targeting whales, big spenders if you don't know, by offering exclusive custom content. They charged $60 to $80 per custom item, on top of the usual store items like ranks and custom kits. Now, this strategy is very effective. I know I definitely shouted it out in my other monetization videos, and it really does work. You want to focus on stuff that's going to be able to be purchased multiple times, and it really, really works. But yeah, overall, Xylem isn't really a competitor of Hydroponic during the times when both were active. They simply beat us, whether that's because they were better, Hydro was trash, or just due to dips in Unturned's player count, maybe all of them. Well, I'll leave that to you to decide. Now, next to the best competitor of Hydroponic. Now, for the last competitor, we have R&R. Now, R&R is a server that has battled with Hydroponic as a rival since both servers were both created around the same period in 2017. Now, back in those early days, they were under different names before, and even before real competition was even a thing. Because back in those days, you could have no more than 24 players, and even then, you could have a little bit more if you had certain special plugins, but generally 24 is the max. So it was a ton of other servers all over the place, and we didn't really have to compete back then. Now, R&R is owned by a guy named Ryan, who's probably best known for being either gone like a dad, or hard to reach. Oh, and apparently he bought a Tesla with money earned from R&R. Just some random facts I picked up. And by the way, he's probably one of the better owners out there, just to make that clear. All things considered, I'd say we were about equal during our competition when it comes to being good or bad. You know, it balanced out. Now, R&R was very similar to Hydroponic during our key competitive periods. They both ran non-drop armor, safe zones, and inclusive PvP, all staples of Hydroponic up until the end of the Golden Age. Now, funny story, R&R had a developer named Nikki, who eventually left and joined Hydro, only to copy and paste R&R's permissions into Hydro without even changing it at all. And R&R staff eventually found out about this, and, you know, it was a minor little drama, but it was still really, really funny, I have to admit. Oh, and Nikki, yeah, he may have ended up being a bad person, allegedly, with some very bad tastes. But as a developer, you know, he was fine. At least at the time he was staff on Hydro. You know, I consider R&R and Hydroponic to be brotherly servers, given how similar they were, right down to plugin overlap. There was even a case where I commissioned plugins from my old developer John Knitter, who then sold those plugins to the other servers, including R&R. For the record, I wouldn't allow that today. Back then, I didn't realize it was happening. Never asked for exclusivity, mind you, but, you know, I kind of just assumed it would happen. No ill will, though. John Knitter was cool. Didn't expect that to happen. In the old days, though, Hydroponic generally beat R&R, but in their most recent peak from late 2024 onwards, they did have us beat constant 60 player counts, much like what modern Xylem sees. Though, you know, Hydro still did pretty good. Just, you know, going to drop armor definitely capped the amount of player count we could get. Could never compete with these massacres that have much farther overlap with tons of different communities. Either way, though, I'm happy to see there wasn't much drama between Hydro and R&R. In fact, I hardly even know what Ryan or the R&R team even really thinks about me. Probably not positive. I mean, most owners, for some reason, just don't like each other. No idea really why. You know, but for my place of general ignorance, I think it's okay. I mean, I've always had a positive view of them, for the most part, right? Anyway, that's the main three competitors of Hydroponic. Now, there are some honorable mentions, and that being Gravity. Gravity was a pretty big server for a short period of time. Well, I shouldn't say short. They were pretty big for a decent stretch of time, and they did really well. Although, I don't really have much to say about them, so I didn't really include them as a separate category. If you guys have any suggestions or ideas you guys think you want me to talk about, feel free to hit those in the comments. I'm always open to different ideas that you guys want me to talk about, especially if it's about something that I can answer about Hydroponic or server ownership and Unturned. But yeah, I don't want to hold you guys for too long. Let me know your guys' thoughts of this video in the comments, and I will see you guys next time.